Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning here in the West, this afternoon, those who are in Africa and Europe, and this evening for those who are in the Far East. We are delighted once more to have you here to part of this new webinar. If you are unmuted, please go ahead and mute yourself. We are so glad that you have joined in again for another webinar. And this is the last webinar of the year. You cannot believe it, but this is webinar number 12 of this year. And so it's exciting that one of our board members will be our speaker today. He's one of the board members of QLRC for 2025. And so it is really nice that we'll get to end the year together. Please just use that chat area to tell us your name and where you're joining us from. Please mute yourself. If you have not, please mute yourself. And so that we know where you're joining us from. Looking at the names, I can tell we have people coming, joining from the US, from Thailand, from the Philippines, and I think from Ghana as well. And so this is exciting that we have people joining from different parts of the world. Before I forget, so that we don't forget later on, our website for the conference that will be next year has been launched. If you didn't see that in your email inbox, please make sure you do that. And some abstracts have started coming in. You don't want to wait until May to submit your abstract. You can already submit your abstract, and within 2 weeks, you'll hear from us to ensure that you have your abstract approved. If it's not approved, then you still have time to work on another one until it is done. So let me introduce our keynote speaker, our webinar speaker. And later on, Sir Albin will facilitate this webinar. So let's do that. Dr. Denchai Prabjandee, I'm sorry, is an assistant professor of teacher education in the Teaching English as a Global Language program at the Faculty of Education in the University, Burapha University, Thailand. His research interests explores the impact of global Englishes on teaching education. His research appears in prominent journals, including World Englishes. And for those who come of us who come from applied linguistics, we are very familiar with this this journal, Asian Englishes System, and the International Journal of Applied Linguistics. Actually, JAL is one of the really leading journals in the field of applied linguistics for those who are in that field. He's also the author of a recently published book, Teacher Education for Global English's Language Teaching by Bloomsbury. Bury. Congratulations on that new publication, Dr. Denchai. It is a wonderful opportunity for us to hear Dr. Denchai talking about data representation in qualitative research, some strategies and considerations. And if you're planning to have a certificate for this webinar, you need to take a screenshot of you attending, and then you're going to send your request to our email, info@qlrconnect.com. If you do that, and then you're a member, a registered member of QLRC, you will be able to get the certificate. Dr. Denchai, please speak to us. Share with us what you have prepared.
Thank you very much, Dr. Safari, for a very nice introduction. Okay, so good evening, everyone. Good evening from Thailand. Thank you for having me to talk about data representation in qualitative research. I'm going to share with you some of the strategies and consideration when we represent the data, especially data in qualitative research. These are the topics that I will be covering today, but mostly I will also include examples from my own research. to illustrate the points, not because it's a good example of data representation, but it's because I know from front and back of the decision made and also the things that I consider when I represent the data, particularly in journal articles. So, but before that, let me talk a little bit about my work so that you understand when I talk about data representation, these are the lens that I'm looking at. Uh, 11 years ago, I went to the United States to learn about bilingual multicultural and ESL education at the University of Northern Colorado, USA. Over there, I took a lot of qualitative research classes with my inspiring and amazing professor, Dr. Maria Lehman, who is very generous to be here with us, and also the QLRC board member. I took many classes, qualitative classes with her, actually. The first one was Introduction to Qualitative Research, and then I took case study, narrative inquiry, and also educational ethnography, and one ethic class as well. So, since I have graduated, I have used narrative inquiry in my work, narrative case study, ethnographic case study, and also narrative ethnography. And my research area, as Dr. Safari mentioned, it's about teacher identity and global English language teaching. In today's talk, I'm going to take you to the journey of how I learned to write qualitative research report. And hopefully some of the things that I mentioned will be useful for you in representing your own data. So when I was a doctoral student, these are the three books that I carry with me at all times. The first book is by Harry Walcott, Writing Up Qualitative Research, and then the second book is by Goodall, Writing Qualitative Inquiry, Self-Stories, and Academic Life. And the next one is Qualitative Research Methods, book by Tracy. These three books are very important because Dr. Lehman have used in her class and introduced to me. And at that time, I was very excited about doing qualitative research. And similar to some of you here, I was very inexperienced at that time, and it was very struggling for me to write qualitative report. But I found that these three books are very important. What I learned about these three books are as follows. First, when you write the like before you write a qualitative research report, Walcott encouraged us qualitative researcher to think graphically. So during the data analysis, you are overwhelmed with you might be overwhelmed with data, right? Right? Tons of data. We know that data analysis in qualitative research is a lot of work and it takes a lot of time. But at the end of the day, if you can think graphically about the data, it will be very useful for you to write up the report. And then what I learned, another thing that I learned from the three books are, you need to do kind of start writing. My Dr. Lehman would say, just write it, and then tightening up, consulting theories, and getting feedback. So the three books actually changed my view of writing. When I was an undergraduate as student, I was taught to outline. So we have to have a very clear outline before we start writing. Now, learning from these three books, I could say that we can still continue outlining, but we just have to write it first. So after writing at first, and then we can tightening up, consult the data, consult the theories, and then revising it again. And then Tracy and Walcott would say that we need to, when writing up qualitative data, we need to stay with empirical data and engage in self-reflexivity while writing. And finally, what I learned from those three books is the know the audience. So I brought during my, qualitative classes, I also have kind of learned from those three books. And then and I ended up using portraiture methodology in my dissertation. Portraiture methodology is a combination of many features of existing qualitative research methodology. It aims to capture a sense of a phenomenon, but at the same time try to blur the boundaries between art and science. So the researchers are the primary instrument taking the readers and also to the tunnel of the knowledge. So I ended up doing that. It's what a very I would say postmodern and critical qualitative methodology that advocate for reflexivity and also transparency in data collection. So those are the experience that I, brought with me. Now, after I graduated from my PhD, and then I came back at Burapha University in Thailand, and I also started teaching qualitative research for master degree student and PhD students. This is the area that they often have questions for me. They will often ask after they did the analysis, and then what? And then how can they represent the data? That is why today I'm here to share with you some of the tips or strategies and considerations that I use when representing the data. For me, I could see that the data analysis and data representation is interconnected. When you analyze the data, it is very important for you as a researcher to think about how can you represent the data? What are things that you could do? And when we talk about data analysis, it can be inductive, it can be deductive, depending on your research questions and depending on your research objectives. But ultimately, mostly for qualitative research, I would suggest to use inductive approach because the themes should be emerged from the analysis rather than filtering through the theoretical framework. And the commonly used method for inductive qualitative data analysis is what we call the coding method, in which you will have codes and then categories and then also the themes. So here is what it looks like when you do the data analysis. Currently, I have used a free software called Target. It's a website that is free for us, qualitative researchers, to tag the data. And then this is free and everyone can use it. And after using Target, this is what it's look like when you do Target. So on the right hand side, those are the script or the reflection that you have. Those are your data, and then you can highlight it and you can tag. And then to the left hand side is the densities of each code that you could see. And now this is what the data analysis would look like. You will have the density and you group together into categories. And this is what it look like in the data analysis. Most of my students stop right here and then they don't know what to do with it. So I'm going to share with you some of the things that we could do to help you start writing data. So for me, data representation is essentially an act of telling a story. And when we talk about story, it consists of the beginning, the middle, and the end. But it's not just any kind of story. In qualitative research, it should lead to an argument. And what are you trying to say to the field? Or what is the contribution to the field? For example, in my research, I interview 5 content teachers like mathematics, computer, and science who were asked by the principal to implement CLIL or content and language integrated learning in their classrooms. And these teachers, they were trained to use Thai to teach content classes. But now the school director asked them to use English as the medium of instruction and implemented CLIL. So I interview them, and then each teacher were interviewed 3 times, and then I use inductive coding method to analyze the data. And those are the themes that I found. So you could see that it looks like their trajectories where they step into CLIL, they conform to new roles, and then they need to do trial and error methods and they need to engage in endless professional development and then changes teacher identity. And they continue implementing CLIL despite their collegial resistance. These themes will lead to one argument that I want to say to the field of CLIL teacher professional development. It takes one identity to become a CLIL teacher, not just changing the language of instruction. Can you see that when we talk about data analysis, you need to have something to say to the field when you're representing it. So the next topic that I would like to talk about is, some strategies and considerations as you start writing your qualitative report. And I use the word sums because it's my own strategies. It might work with you, or it might not work with you. I'm not trying to do as a prescription here. I'm just trying to share what it might look like in terms of data representation. So these are the considerations that I made when I decided to represent the data. The first one is whether you want to represent individual stories or collective stories. As I mentioned earlier, data representation is about telling a story. Now, you can tell an individual story or you can tell collective story. It really depends on research design. For example, if you use narrative inquiry research, it privilege individual stories, but collective understanding also possible as well. If you use case study, sometimes you can use themes and then use case to illustrate streams, and then ethnography, it emphasizes on collective. For example, in my research that I explore teacher identity development, during teaching practicum, I interview two pre-service teachers and then observe them and then conduct shadowing observation. And in this paper, I decided to represent individual story because after I learned about their themes, their stories are so stand out that I cannot really combine them together to represent collectively. So I want to tell the story of Natmi and Niti in this so that it stay true and authenticity to the story. However, in another story, I decided to represent collectively across four participants because they have share experiences of mentoring approaches that impact their identity development. The second consideration that you could do is whether to decide to use first person point of view when writing the qualitative data or third person point of view. And this would depend on research design tradition as well. For example, in narrative inquiry, mostly we would do third person, but first person also used, and I have seen that they use first person, especially those who use portraiture methodology. And mostly in traditional qualitative research, we will do third person point of view. For example, in this paper, I use a combination of first person point of view by taking you to know Mrs. Joy, who teaches immigrant students who arrive the United States with a zero English. I wanted you to get to know to Mrs. Joy. So you will see that I also use a combination of third person point of view and also first person point of view on the right hand side. That's the second column. I observed this interaction from this stand, taking notes at the tables next to Carlos. Mrs. Joy asked Carlos to say afternoon, to say after. Today is September, blah blah blah. So you could see that I insert myself in the story from the first person point of view because I want readers to actually get to know Mrs. Joy through the tunnels of my lens. I'm taking them to Mrs. Joy classrooms. This is one way to do it. Another consideration would be whether data informed or theory informed. This would depend on the study focus and also the order objectives. Earlier, I mentioned that we need to stay to empirical data, whether the data itself is, emergent or novel, that should be data informed. And it can be theory informed, where you use theory as the themes and represent the data. For example, in this paper, I use data informed approach. I didn't represent the themes based on the theory, teacher identity theory. Rather, I use the code to construct the narrative of NatMe. For example, if you look at the codes, right? So those are the codes, and then I combine the codes into categories. You can see that we have two. I have two categories, and then the two categories become themes. So the theme is a teacher identity is developed based on prior biography. Now it is data informed because I use the labels of the code to try to construct the story of NatMe. So you can see that if you look at the codes and you look at the stories of Not Me, I actually use keywords from codes, from categories to construct the narrative or the representations. Okay. In other paper, I use theory informed. This is also teacher identity development as well. So I use teacher identity with different perspective, like self-image, self-esteem, job motivation. So I use that framework to represent the data. And then the emergent theme is how these students perceive themselves, whether they perceive themselves as student or student teachers or teachers. So those are the emergent themes that match with the theoretical framework. All right, the next thing for consideration is what we call dominant versus sequentials. Now, in representing the data, you can present the themes that are salient first. Maybe you may consider density, like which one, is salient, and then you can also do something sequential. For example, for this research, I explore teacher identity construction in relation to the global English paradigm. And I use this one is sequential. If you look at the name of the theme, like early interest in English, forming initial teacher identity, admiring American English accent, exposure to global Englishes, embracing teacher identity for linguistic diversities. And then these three are chronological, so that we could see the the themes from early interest until now, after they were exposed to global Englishes. And I have the argument there that teachers may find global Englishes compatible to their classrooms, provided it aligns discursively with their identity. So these are the message that I wanted to tell the global Englishes literature. Other strategies that I would say to help that I found very useful when writing the representation is that, first of all, in representing the data, it is important to balance between description and interpretation. Mostly, my students will try to stick with what the participant said, and then that's the description. For example, one of my students, she interviewed the teachers, and then the teacher say something, and then she just paraphrase it. I would say that's only description. In representing the data, you need to make a decision as a researcher, like what it means, because meanings are very important in data representation. And then the next one that I always keep in mind is, show and not tell. So, for example, if you want to tell readers that one student teacher perceive themselves as a kind-hearted teacher, If you tell it, you will just say that, okay, Denchai reported in the interview that he is a kind-hearted teacher. That's tell, right? But for show, it means that you will write this description that tell implicitly that this person perceive themselves as a kind-hearted teacher. That would create a rich and thick descriptions of the findings. And this is the next strategy that I found very useful is use verb that activate details. Many of my students would say that would bombard their qualitative research report with adjective, adverbs, relevant details. Um, so for me, it is useful, but overemphasis on adjective and adverb can actually create distract from the message. So I ask them to revise their qualitative data representation by using verbs that activate details. I highly recommend you to read a lot of qualitative reports and then try to collect verbs that after you read the verbs, it actually give you a sense of image. That those are useful language when you're representing the data. The next strategy would be you need to use all data sources when you collected the data. Let's say if you have multiple data collection methods in the data representation, we need to see those resources either triangulated in one themes or either presented in some ways. Okay, it should not be just only one source of data. It should be all sources of data that you collected. And then I would suggest that to link back to the trustworthiness of the data. For example, mostly we will do triangulation, right? And then within one theme, we need to see how you triangulate the data there. If you use member check, for example, it would be very well written if you include, snapshots of the member checking in the themes as well. And then in one of my, my professor book, Dr. Layman's, she often asks me to read and read, write and write, and then revise. So I really like her suggestion because if you want to represent data well, you need to start reading, right? So you cannot just think about how to write and then use your own language. You learn so much from reading, right? For example, this is the examples of description and also interpretation. If you look at the description, for example, Natmi is a 22 years old female student teacher born in the faraway south of Thailand. So this is the description, right? So I stated more like a fact. She immigrated to pursue a Bachelor of Education in Teaching English at a university located in the East. So this is also a description. She entered teacher education with a strong determination. You see that? Strong determination is my interpretation. After I talked to her, gathering many information, I could sense that she had a strong determination to become a teacher, which was nested in the constellation of factors such as dream job. So those are the quotes that I use it. And then I support it with the quote as well. Another one that I love is Show and Tell. This is by Tony Adams. He published an autoethnography in about his relationship with his father. So if you read that, you could see that he used the repeated right phrases to emphasize, and then after you read this, you kind of sense that his father and him has a trouble relationship together. So instead of saying that my father and I have a trouble relationship, so he show us by telling a story of this and on and on and on. You could see that there are tensions after reading this, there are tensions between the author and also his own fathers. The final topic that I would like to talk about is aesthetic and rigor. Um, so when you're representing the data, of course, you will think about aesthetics and rigor in representing the data. Have you ever read a manuscript or a research report that is so rich that you wish you could write similar to the author? I have. I have read many papers that I wish I could write well like that. So those are the papers that you should look at and analyze the language used in them. So I highly recommend you to read this paper because I could see that I learned a lot from this report. Daryl Colney talk about making qualitative research report less boring. And I actually take a lot of her tips to write. And in her tips, for example, she said that we can open the text with vivid and vital, and you can also do scene by scene writing, and you can also using realistic details, and then show don't tell, very similar to other people, and then try to use active voice, not passive voice in qualitative research. And then sometimes you can use like capture conversation. For example, when you use focus group interview, especially when you represent the themes and then collected the data by using focus group, it is very important to have like capture conversation there. So these are something that I find it very useful. You need to think about how can you engage readers emotionally. So this is another thing that I would say. When you write qualitative research report, you don't want to be very dry. You do qualitative research. It has to engage readers emotionally. After you read it, you get a sense of it. For example, one technique that you can do is um, you can include, all senses, smell, touch, hear, see, not just like visuals. And you can also describe a shared experience, between you and readers. Pick something that is matter so that it engage readers emotionally. Another thing would be use thick description that implicitly reflect the literature. I think this is very important and it reflects the issue of rigor in qualitative research a lot. When you write qualitative research report, you need to keep in mind that you want to say something to the community, and it should reflect the literature. It should challenge the literature somehow. You need to strategize that the story that you tell can contribute to the field or the theories or the literature. I think this is not an easy thing to do, but if you normally some of my students would skip the literature part and read the findings, and I often say that don't skip the literature review part in the literature, because that can many researchers will strategically present literature review, and then the findings either challenge the literature review or contribute something to that. And then finally, I would say that many times you can consider using multimodal representation to engage readers emotionally. For example, in this article, I use self-study teacher education practices to write or examine my experiences as a teacher educator with transnational experiences living and studying in the United States for 4 years. And then coming back to Thailand, I experienced a lot of identity tensions and negotiating, and then how I negotiate the tensions of that. Without this project, I almost quit my job as a teacher educator. And then I wrote a lot of dialogue in there. And then for some reason, after I tried to represent my feeling, my emotion through words, but that couldn't really capture the feeling that I found. Um, for me, leaving teaching is a big deal for me. I almost quit teaching because of of many things, and I don't understand why I want to quit teaching. If someone tell me that I would quit teaching, I think they were insane. But the experience of this make me realize that I need to um, really I struggle a lot in terms of identity and also tensions. And now I consider using multimodals representations. Those are my own pictures. For the first one, if you could see someone with a tank and someone there, that's me as well. I feel as I am suffocated by responsibilities. So it's like trying to find my ways. So if I just write the description without the picture, it might not provoke the emotion that I experience as tensions. And that is also the picture that I took, and it represents my feeling of less energy and so on. And those are, I don't know whether you noticed that one, the picture is me, but it was blurring. I couldn't figure out whether I belong to which culture actually. So I wrote like a poem that I learned from Dr. Lehman class, I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know what I can do. I don't know what I want to be. Don't I know who I am? Don't I know what I can do? Don't I know what I want to be? Know about self, know about future, know about what I know, no worries. So it just, I leap in between that. And then those are some of the strategies that I learned. So finally, I will end my presentation with some of the work that influenced my writing a lot as a scholar. So these are the writing that I read when I was a doctoral student with Dr. Lehman. The first one is by Harry Walcott, Adequate School and Inadequate Education, The Life History of a Sneaky Kid. So I first read this article in educational ethnography class, and it was a story of Brad and Walcott that they like observed together. And another thing would be this Tony Adams that influenced my writing a lot. So he talked about his troubled relationship with his father. I learned so many literary style from this too. And I would end my presentation with, recommending a book by my professor, Dr. Lehman. Too bad that I didn't learn from this book at that time. And Dr. Lehman, wrote this book after I graduated. It's Writing, Representing, and Qualitative Research. Those are the topics that I have covered so far, and hopefully, within that limited time, I could see that it's useful for you as researchers, maybe seasoned researchers or novice researcher attending this webinar. The strategies, as I mentioned earlier, are just something that I did, and I encourage you to try out. Or if you have some suggestion for others, we can discuss later on about this. So thank you very much for taking the time to attend such evening in Asia and so on. Thank you so much. Okay, back to you, Dr. Safari.
So Albin will be facilitating the Q&A section.
Thank you very much, Dr. Denchai Prabjandee, for that very enriching and structured walkthrough of your presentation on data representation in doing qualitative research. Indeed, your expertise has helped us in doing data representation later in our respective research endeavors. We're actually growing in number. We started with just 40 a while ago, but it's now reaching 74. No? So we're actually very happy to see all of you here tonight or wherever you are in this globe and whatever time zone you're currently in. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. You're all welcome in this very insightful and enriching qualitative research Connect webinar session. With us tonight, no, was Dr. Denchai Prabjandee, who just shared with us the strategies and techniques on how to do data representation in qualitative research. Now, at this point in time, we'll entertain some questions from our dear participants. I can see some questions in the chat box already, or perhaps others are still absorbing the topics that were discussed or others are still formulating their questions to be posted later on our chat box. Feel free to post whatever questions you have or maybe insights or inputs you have regarding the presentation in our chat box. Okay, the first question is from Maria Laman. Okay, according to ma'am, the question is, what do you find to be a top area in qualitative research representation people struggle with, and how should this area be addressed? Dr. Denshai?
Um, you, Maria, you mean the research design that people um like struggle with? Can you elaborate more on that?
No, I mean, when you think about your students' work, what do you think is the top writing areas that they struggle in when they move to the representing?
Um, I think how can they so for my student they struggle. They could do very well with coding themes and stuff like that, but when they write their like representation, many times they don't know how can they incorporate the codes and the categories into
Hmm.
their representation, and how can they um, mostly another thing is that they don't want to interpret the meaning because they are afraid that they might insert their too much subjectivity in the representation, which I often tell them you need to do your jobs as a researchers. Please interpret and help based on data. I think those are the areas that they kind of struggle. Many times I have seen them just like paraphrase the interviews into the data representation, and actually that doesn't give much insight into the literature and contribution to the field.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Denshai. I guess the question uh, was adequately addressed by our resource speaker, Maria. Okay, at this point, let us entertain or accommodate other questions from the participants. Again, please feel free to type in the chat box your questions. But I can see that at this point in time, most are comments, most are messages of appreciation and gratitude to our speaker for a very comprehensive, okay, presentation on doing data representation in qualitative research. I guess there's a follow-up question from Maria. What is something we could all do this week to work on our writing? Okay, maybe that's a good application and
Right,
a
right.
source of avenue of collaboration.
Yeah, we could
Okay,
do writing. It doesn't have to be uh, another point, Maria, that my student often struggle is that they often perceive themselves as not so good writers. If you do qualitative research, you especially if you write in English and your first language is not English, right? So it's it takes a lot of time to actually process and also write like that. Um, I think reading is always helpful, especially read qualitative work. Another thing, you don't even need to read qualitative work. You can read like fiction, non-fiction, so that it's useful for you as when you write the data. I think that's the tip as well.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Denchai. All points noted. Some more questions from our participants? Okay, if there is none, I actually prepared some questions also regarding the presentation. Uh, to Dr. Denshai, you mentioned a while ago the concept of trustworthiness, and we know that this is one of the most important considerations that we have to bear in mind in doing qualitative research. Now, Doc, what do you think would be our indicators aside from the trustworthiness that we can use to evaluate whether or not a qualitative research data representation is both methodologically rigorous and ethically sound?
Mhm. Thank you for your question. For me, um, you, many times, I think qualitative researchers are struggling with how can we make our analysis trustworthy. Trustworthiness occur in the analysis stage, and then if you analyze, you collect the data, you play with your subjectivity, and then I think being transparent about it, about the process, showing how the themes emerge, the codes, the category emerge, and then writing that reflect the literature. I think after you do all of these things, I feel like the trustworthiness is there. Recently, I play with ChatGPT, trying to ask, ChatGPT to write like the story. And then, for me, I could tell immediately that this is something like made up. And I also test with my student as well, like which story that sound like research, which story sound like, fiction. And they could tell immediately after reading the example, because the one thing is that it's so full of, unrealistic details. Another one would be it's crowded, it's rich in itself in data. So I would say if you do all of those things that I mentioned earlier, being transparent, reflexivity, read the literature, engage emotionally, finally, readers will feel that this is the analysis that it can be trustworthy. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Denshai, for that response. Now, allow me to read another question from our participants, specifically from Sir Ernesto Birezo from the Philippines. Okay. How do we connect doing data representation in qualitative research in the context of the Philippines with different diversity and cultural contexts? Dr. Denshai.
I'm not sure I understand your question. Would you like to elaborate more on that? Like how?
Yes, Doc. Okay. I guess the question is more on the applicability of doing this technique in doing qualitative research, considering that in the Philippines, we have diverse culture and cultural contexts, particularly in the case, he mentioned about science or science education particularly. So how do we expand
Oh, okay,
or
okay.
and the use of this data
So
representation in science education?
I would say that in some field, in some field, people have this paradigm, like a way of thinking about things, and that is very difficult to challenge. In applied linguistics and also English language teaching as well, the majority of us, I would say, would be it's very traditional. So when we do qualitative research, they still ask us about the number of participants, the generalizability of the data. Those are the quantitative lens, right? Now, I would say that for the suggestion that I have, would be useful for depends on the field, whether you wanted to do like a super traditional kind of qualitative research, or a little bit more evocative, data representation and writing. So I would say that it just depends on your field. You have to know your field. Um, for example, in my case, I learned from Dr. Maria Lehman that we can write poetry. It's very postmodern, critical, decolonized, right? But when I come back to Thailand, those are things that I have to really keep it, because my field and in Thailand, we're still traditional. I would say I want to say everyone is traditional, but the field in general is it's still not that accepting that diversity and evocative representation. So I have to really use traditional representation. And now, once you get into publication and then you publish more, I used to write a very postmodern. I got rejection all the time. So, so those are things that I have to adjust and learn along the way. Yes.
Thank you, Doc. Another question from our participant. What do you suggest to be a good strategy to help students enhance sense making before writing out the findings? I guess it's very applicable to the teachers.
So, this is what I think, what I often ask my student to do. First, after they finished like data analysis, I ask them to print the data analysis out and think graphically, and then put in there, and then start free writing. I often ask them to do free writing based on what they see as data. So after they started free writing, and then leave it behind, and then always come back again and consult with the data. Now, after they look at the data, they look at their writing, they can consult the data, and then refine word choices, and then adding more, tighten up, um, and always be reflexive about whether the writing is 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 based on data or not. So it's an interplay between free writing, consulting with the data, reading the literature, and then ultimately the data representation will be ready. That's what I often might tell my students.
Thank you very much, Doc. That's a very good set of tips that we can actually use, no, in teaching our students. I guess this would be the last question, as much as we would like to accommodate more because we're under time constraints. This is a very good question, no? A very relevant one, especially in the age of AI. Now, some researchers may utilize AI tools to analyze data. What is your professional thoughts on this, Dr. Denchai?
I would say that I I try to use both AI, like AI to help, but when writing up the findings, I couldn't even um I couldn't answer whether how are the themes are organized. Like, is it the theme, is it the categories, is it the codes? I would say you can play with it, but ultimately I would ask you to stick with the data. You are responsible for telling the participant stories. You are responsible. It's not your stories, right? You collect the data from them, and now you analyze them, and then you are trying to give voice to them, maybe tell their story to the wider academic community. Now, if you start writing using AI, it always end up having limited depth, I would say. You can play with it, but ultimately, I would recommend you to actually stick with the data, stick with the empirical data. That's what matters. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I guess the point really with the question and of course with the response of Dr. Denshai is that AI is our companion, no? It's our tool. It should not replace us in doing data representation, data interpretation. It's still the researcher who eventually, no, interprets, analyzes, and synthesizes all of those data from our participants in order to create those meaningful themes and of course address the questions and the objectives of our respective qualitative researches. Okay, it's 5 minutes before 9 p.m. in the Philippines. I guess as much as we would like to really address, no, all the questions, because I can see a lot of good questions in the chat box. But again, because we are under time constraints, I guess we can continue perhaps our discussion on our official social media platforms. I guess our qualitative research experts and enthusiasts and Dr. Denshai would still be very uh, uh, welcoming, no, to the questions that you will be discussing or you will be sharing later, no, on our platform. Okay, okay. At this point, allow me to have uh, a quick run through, no, of some of the important announcements that we need to, of course, share with you since we are in this official platform in this 23rd webinar session. So your attendance is actually recorded, no? This session is actually being recorded and it will be available on our official platform on our website, particularly www.qlrconnect.com within 24 hours after the session. And if you wish to have a certificate of attendance, please reach out to our secretariat and share with them a screenshot of your attendance, your presence in this day's webinar session. And then if you are not yet a member of our organization, we invite you to be one. Okay. So I guess the link was shared a while ago in the chat box. And join us in this growing community and enjoy the perks and the benefits of being a member of the Qualitative Research Connect, a growing scholarly organization of qualitative researchers and enthusiasts. And of course, allow me to also share some important updates regarding our upcoming activities, particularly on our next QLRC webinar. It will be happening next month. Next month is already January 2026. We will keep you posted on some updates regarding our schedule, our topic, and our activities, no? On January of 2026. Also, allow me to share with you some details about our upcoming Global Qualitative Research Connect Conference, which is happening on September 7 to 9, 2026 at Cebu Technological University, Cebu City, Philippines, with the theme Fostering Social Change Through Qualitative Research. It will be adopting a hybrid mode, and we hope to see you, no, on that very important uh, convention of qualitative researchers and enthusiasts globally. Important dates to remember: on May 31, that's the end of abstract submission; June 30, end of presenters registration, and end of early registration for the general participants or the delegates; July 1 to 31, regular registration for the participants, and after July 31, that's the late registration for the delegates. It will be happening, of course, all in 2026. Okay, so I guess that's all for today's webinar session. It has been very insightful, meaningful. It was very brief, yet very concise and very impactful. That all of the things that were shared by our esteemed resource speaker on his expertise in global Englishes and in the field of linguistics would allow us to have a clear glimpse and a very comprehensive perspective on how to do data representation, which is one of the techniques in doing qualitative research in the field of education, the field of science, and whatever cultural contexts and diversities that we may be are into. but they are all very helpful and essential strategies and techniques in doing qualitative research in our respective research endeavors. This has been your moderator for tonight, uh, Professor Alvin J. Tabamo from the Xavier Ateneo School of Education, Cagayan de Oro City, Republic of the Philippines. It's exactly 9 p.m., so I guess this is the end of our session tonight, but our mission continues as we continuously emerge and inspire people to be with us in doing qualitative research and continue making an impact in our respective communities through qualitative research. Thank you very much for your presence. Bye bye.
Thank you.